Think about workplace pranks. You know, a few rubber ducks, a silly gift. Sounds pretty harmless, right? Well, what if I told you two simple pranks recently ended up in massive legal battles? One prankster got a huge payout, and the other, fired. It really makes you wonder, where exactly is that line between funny and fired? Let's get into it. Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? And honestly, the answer is not as simple as you'd think. But we're going to break it down by looking at two real-life cases that went all the way to Australia's Fair Work Commission. By the end of this, you'll see exactly what makes one prank a harmless laugh and another a career-ending mistake.
Okay, get this. In our first story, a prank with rubber ducks and what some called a satanic ritual, not only did the employees who got fired win their case, they walked away with over $15,000.
But then you have our second case, a different prank, this time with some X-rated candy, and the employee involved fired. And the commission said, yep, that was the right call. So, what gives? What was so different between these two?
All right, let's dive into our first case. I like to call this one the case of the satanic ducks. And yeah, it's as weird as it sounds. We're talking hospitality workers, rubber ducks, and a hand-drawn pentagram. Seriously.
So here's how it all went down. It starts pretty innocently in late June 2025. An employee starts putting rubber ducks around the place, just to lift morale. But then, on July 3rd, things get weird. A manager finds a bunch of ducks set up around a pentagram on her desk. A week later, boom, 2 employees are fired for serious misconduct. But hang on, because by February of the next year, the Fair Work Commission steps in and says, nope, that dismissal was totally unfair.
So what was the deal with the pentagram? You're going to love this. When the employee was asked about it, her explanation was, and I quote, ducks engaged in a summoning ritual to summon more ducks. She even said she was going to bring in a giant duck the next day as the result of the ritual. It was all meant to be a completely silly, lighthearted joke. Well, the manager was not laughing. She filed a formal complaint, saying the pentagram was a symbol evoking the devil and that it absolutely terrified her because of some past experiences. And that complaint right there is what kicked off the whole investigation that led to them being fired. So you've got these two totally opposite stories, right? On one side, the employees are saying, look, it was just a dumb, harmless prank. We didn't mean to offend anyone. But the company, they came back hard, calling it grossly offensive and saying it created a hostile work environment. That's how they justified firing them. Okay, but here comes the twist, and it's a big one. Just a month after firing those employees, the manager, the same one who claimed to be terrified of the symbol, went out and got a tattoo of that exact same pentagram. Yeah, the commission called her actions somewhat incongruent with her story, which is a very polite way of saying her story didn't add up. And that just blew the company's case right out of the water.
Okay, now let's switch gears to our second case. This one was way more personal and the consequences way more serious. This is the story of the X-rated parcel.
And the timeline here is super important too. So in March, some senior colleagues cook up this prank. In April, the package is delivered, the whole thing blows up, and an investigation starts. Critically, the employee we're focused on breaks some major confidentiality rules during that investigation. By June, she's out of a job, and come December, the commission looks at all of it and says the firing was fair. Now, this is absolutely crucial. This prank wasn't some random office-wide joke. No, this was targeted. It was specifically aimed at a junior employee who'd only been there for 5 months. And worse, the pranksters knew she was really distressed by having an adult store on her delivery route. They knew her vulnerability, and they used it as the punchline. So what was in this parcel? It was candy, but not the kind you'd share at your desk. The messages on them were, let's just say, extremely explicit. We're talking crude, sexual phrases meant to shock and humiliate. So unlike the duck prank with its silly pentagram, this was direct, it was vulgar, and there was no way it could be seen as appropriate for work.
And then there's the issue of honesty, or really the total lack of it. When the investigation started, this employee just wasn't straight with them. She tried to downplay what she did, she tried to pin the blame on a more junior colleague, and she broke the rules by talking to witnesses. The commission basically said her testimony was a mess of half-truths, deflection, and implausible denial. And that right there, that completely destroyed any trust her employer had in her.
So let's step back. 2 pranks, 2 people fired, but 2 completely opposite outcomes. The duck crew gets a $15,000 payday, and the parcel person loses their job and their legal case. So let's get into the nitty-gritty of why.
Here it is, plain and simple. The Satanic Ducks, an unfair dismissal. The X-rated parcel, a fair dismissal. The real difference here wasn't just the pranks themselves, it was all about the context, everything that happened around them. This really breaks it all down for us. Let's look at the key factors. First, intent. The duck prank was meant to be silly, to lift morale. The parcel prank, it was designed to make someone uncomfortable. Second, the target. The ducks weren't aimed at anyone in particular, it was just a general workplace thing. The parcel was laser-focused on one specific vulnerable person. Third, honesty. The duck pranksters owned up to what they did. The parcel prankster, she was dishonest and tried to shift the blame. And finally, impact. The manager's claim of being terrified by the ducks fell apart, but the junior employee in the other case suffered real, genuine distress.
So what does all this mean for you and me in our own jobs? Let's connect these wild stories back to the real world and pull out some lessons that apply to literally any workplace.
So, before you pull a prank at work, maybe just run through this mental checklist. 1. What is your actual intent? Are you genuinely trying to be funny and build team spirit, or is it a passive-aggressive dig? 2. Know your audience. Is this a joke between equals, or are you targeting someone who might feel powerless? 3. Think about the aftermath. Are you prepared for things to go wrong and for an investigation? And 4, and this is a big one, honesty is everything. Lying during an investigation can get you fired all on its own, no matter how harmless the original prank was.
That parcel prank was labeled serious misconduct, and that's a really important legal term. It basically means you did something so bad that it completely shatters the trust between you and your employer. The relationship is just broken beyond repair. And in the parcel case, the targeted bullying plus the lying, yeah, that checked all the boxes for serious misconduct.
So, if there's one thing to take away from all this, it's this. The line between funny and fired is almost never about the object itself, the ducks or the candy. It's always about the context. It all comes down to your intent, the real impact it has on people, and crucially, your honesty when you're called to account for it.
And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. A good laugh at work can be amazing for morale. We all know that. But where is the line? I want you to think about your own workplace. Does your office culture draw that line in the right spot? Because as these two stories show, the gap between a harmless joke and a career-ending disaster, it's a lot smaller than most of us think.